Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, May 10th, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, Dan Carey, the talented brewer behind New Glarus Brewery in Wisconsin, joins us to talk about aging with oak, both in barrels and with chips. Well, if you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. Also on our site, you can see the new gallery. Yes, I had time to do it. I made time, where I've posted pictures of listeners and viewers wearing their Basic Brewing shirts. And I've also posted pics of Basic Brewing regulars, or as regular as we can be, out in the world, showing the colors, so to speak. I've also put a couple of pictures from Basic Brewing video viewers showing how they watch us on screens both big and small. I appreciate everybody sending those pictures in, and you can find the link near the top of the page on basicbrewingradio.com or basicbrewingvideo.com. Or if you look in the shop on the any of the apparel pages, like the shirt pages, there should be a text link on there too. So I appreciate all that. And also I sent out a bunch of shirts this week with the original design and with the new catchphrase, "Go forth and flocculate." So I expect more cool pics from you guys as you go fun places for your summer vacations. And a special thanks to Paul up in Houghton, Michigan, for providing the spark of inspiration for that catchphrase. I'd forgotten who had given me the idea, but it's because it's been so long. But Paul wrote me and reminded me that, yes, it was him who provided me the original phrase, which I modified a little bit. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the inspiration from Paul. And he's got a shirt, a flocculate shirt, going up toward him. So there you go. Quickly, into the mailbag. Greg from Felton, California writes, "So I stepped up to glass carboys and a recipe that calls for dry hopping in the secondary fermentation. I use pellets in bags for my brewing. How do you dry hop? Just pellets in the bottle? Seems like a bag might introduce contamination, but loose pellets will make racking to the bottling bucket problematic. What do you do?" Well, Greg, this is one where if you ask different brewers, you'll get different results. But you asked me, so this is what I do, and it works for me. I just put the pellets loose in the secondary carboy. I've found that I can use the racking cane or the auto siphon to strategically steer around the hop debris down there as I'm racking. And, the few little bits that wind up in the bottling bucket usually don't end up in the beer. So I've found that simple method works for me. You can buy filters and such to put on the end of your racking cane to avoid, debris and clogging and such as that, but I haven't seen the need yet. So give it a shot. Your mileage may vary, and I'm sure that people use hop bags and such as that to dry hop, but like I say, the simple method works for me. John in Maine writes, "I recently brewed a Belgian clone from the book Beer Captured." John says, "Great book. Directions say to add 1 quart each of strawberry juice and raspberry juice, but in the tips on the side of the page, it says they used 3 parts raspberry, 1 part strawberry. What does this mean? Also, any suggestions on where I can get those 2 things? There is a very large Whole Foods store near me, but I couldn't find any there." Well, John, as I often do when I'm clueless, I forwarded your question. This time I sent it right to the source, Mark and Tess Samatulski, authors of the book, Beer Captured, that you're referring to. And Tess wrote back. She says, "Thanks for buying our book, John. In the Phantom beer, the brewer usually uses half strawberry and half raspberry juice. One of the times we brewed this beer, we used 3/4 raspberry and 1/4 strawberry juice, and we liked it better. It's just personal taste, but we thought we would share this with brewers. If you cannot find juice without preservatives, you might want to look in the frozen juice section. If those have preservatives, then you should buy strawberries and raspberries, freeze them, and then let them thaw in a strainer. press them to extract the juice, and don't forget the peptic enzyme. So I appreciate Tess taking the time to write. And as usual, I appreciate everybody who's writing in. You can drop me a line at james@basicbrewing.com or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And don't forget to check your email address if you're using the form to make sure that it doesn't bounce back to me if you accidentally make a typo. I'm going to jump right into the interview because it is a longer one. Thank goodness. A lot of good information. And I know you're anxious to hear what Dan says. Also, I'm pressed for time this week, basically, and need to get moving. Have you ever noticed that whenever somebody gives you a list of excuses, it's always the one that's the last in the list that's the main one? It's the real reason. Like, we chose this advertising firm because they're creative, experienced, and the head of the firm is our CEO's brother-in-law. That one. Something like that. Anyway, I contacted Dan Carey of New Glarus because I love the beers of theirs that I've been lucky enough to try. They're not available outside Wisconsin unless you know somebody who wants to bring you some. I especially like their fruit beers, and I wanted to get some tips on brewing with fruit. However, as you'll hear, Dan feels he's got a lot invested, time and otherwise, in their fruit processes, and he was understandably tight-lipped about that. And I completely understand. But luckily, he did volunteer to help us learn more about fermenting in and with wood. And Dan Carey, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio. Well, you are the brewmaster at New Glarus Brewing Company, but as I understand from reading your website, that you're not the boss. Is that right?
That's right. My business partner is my wife. She's much smarter than I am, and she's got much better business sense than I am. So she gets to run the business, and I get to make the beer. Believe me, it's a heck of a lot easier to brew beer than it is to sell it.
Now, if that's not a perfect relationship in the eyes of the home brewer, I don't know what is.
That's right. She raised all the money. She deals with the bankers and the lawyers and the distributors, and I get to order malt and hops and brew beer.
And for those home brewers out there who aren't married, their next question would be, does she have a sister?
She does, but unfortunately she's also married.
Oh, okay.
You ought to find your own.
A rare breed, I'm sure.
That's right.
Give us some background on how you got into brewing, and I understand that you've got a lot of official training being a brewer as well.
Well, I grew up in San Francisco, and when I was a kid, there's five kids, and we'd load up in the station wagon, and we'd go car camping up and down the coast of California, up into to British Columbia, and we always would visit wineries or cheese factories or breweries. Most tours are free, so it's something to do. And I always thought it was fun. Even when I was very young, I loved the taste of beer, and I just thought breweries were cool. The tile floors and the copper kettles, and everything was clean, and it kind of had an old world feel to it. It was magical, and I just thought, this is really what I want to do, be a brewer. So I went to school at University of California at Davis, and I studied food science with an emphasis in brewing and cheese making. And when I graduated, that was in 1983, I went to work at a small brewery in Montana, and I went over to Germany, and I worked at a small brewery in near Munich as a brewer's apprentice. And then I went to the Siebel Institute to their diploma course. Worked for a fabricator building breweries, and then I went to work for Anheuser-Busch, brewing beer there. And while I was there, I passed my Brewmaster exam from the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, which is a English institute that offers certification as a brewmaster. And it was at that point that my wife said, I'm tired of being a corporate wife for Anheuser-Busch. She was from Wisconsin. She said, I'd like to go back to Wisconsin, and let's go back and start a brewery. that way we can work together and live in a small town and be normal.
And you thought about it for about 2 microseconds.
Actually, it's. I was very nervous about it because I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a pessimist at heart, and working at Anheuser-Busch, it's a good company, good pay, and I was doing well. I'm sure I could have, made an impact there. And the idea of starting a brewery in the early '90s was, a lot of businesses fail. So I was very much afraid. I knew how much work it was, and I knew the failure rate. And you never know. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. So she was very confident that it would work, and I was scared to death most of the time.
But so far, it's worked out.
Yeah. Fear motivates me well. It gets me up in the morning and brings me into work and makes me try extra hard.
Well, it seems to be paying off, and you're in the middle. Are you in the middle of or near the end of a brewery expansion up there?
We're about in the middle of it. We made a decision in August of 2005 that we were going to outgrow our existing brewery, and we're currently have outgrown it, and we're actually brewing above capacity, which is quite a trick. But we made a decision at that point to build a brewery, and we finished. We chose a vendor. We finished engineering about the beginning of this year, and now we're really heavily into construction. We hope to have the brewery done by the end of this year, and it's really a major undertaking. It's a very modern brewery, and we're working with a company out of near Munich, Germany, and it's quite a brewery.
Now, I have sampled some of your beers. I've had some friends bring some to where I live here in Northwest Arkansas, and at the Great American Beer Festival, there's always a big long line for your beers, and you are right now only distributed in Wisconsin. Is expanding your brewery going to change that?
No, actually, our marketing philosophy has always been to be a local company, and we never really concerned ourselves with how many barrels we sold. We really, I mean, as corny as it sounds, we thought what we'll do is we'll just make the absolute best beer that we possibly can, day in, day out, and hope that people will buy it. And we don't want to be a big brewery. And we know the Wisconsin market. We know how to sell beer in this state. And frankly, we don't have a lot of money for expensive salesmen. The farther you go afield, the more difficult it is to sell beer because you lose that connection with your customer. People come into the brewery every day, and my door is open. They can stick their head in. They can talk to me. So we're very much part of the community, and we want to stay that way. And all we're building this brewery for is to keep up with the demand. Unfortunately, in business and in the brewing business, if there is a demand for your beer and you don't fill it, somebody else will take it. And it's a strange thing, but you start to then lose your momentum. Because once someone decides, well, I'm going to switch to this beer because it's available, they don't come back to your brand, and you start to atrophy. So, unfortunately, we have to fill the demand, and we need a new brewery to do that. But it's not what we want to do. What we want to do, believe me, I would love to be brewing beer in a little 5-barrel brewery, and but we have to take care of our customers.
So you come from Anheuser-Busch, who they are some of the pioneers in not only figuring out how to distribute beer over a wide area, but just distributing anything over a wide area.
That's right.
Did coming from that environment influence your decision to stay kind of small and local?
No. I would say that what I learned at Anheuser-Busch was the continuing daily fight to maintain and improve quality. Some of your listeners may feel that American light lagers are not so interesting, and I won't argue that point. However, the drive for excellence is something that was instilled at Anheuser-Busch and into me, and so that's been overriding, in my mind, is to keep a clean brewery, to keep a modern brewery, to invest in machinery, to invest in people, to invest in process, and to try every day to make the absolute best beer you can, quality-wise. So that's what I learned at Anheuser-Busch. The marketing end is really, my wife she really is a marketing genius. She very much understands our customers and knows what they want. And that's really the secret of success in business, is just to deliver what your customers want. Most businesses don't. You know, we live in a world where you buy a computer and they say we have 24-hour service. My gosh, it's awful. There is no service. You try to get on an airplane, nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
If you run a business and you care and you go the extra mile, and when you make a mistake, you apologize and you make it right and you take care of your customers, it's really a no-brainer. I'm surprised that more companies don't do it. They feel it's an expensive investment to take care of your customers, but in the long run, it's a good investment.
Well, maybe we'll see the pendulum swing back at one point.
I hope so, because I hate being on hold.
Now, we love talking about craft brewers and craft beers because we want our listeners to be able to know that there are good beers out there that they should be looking for. But our primary focus is on home brewing. Do you have a background in home brewing yourself?
No, actually I don't. I think I did. When I was in college, I made a couple of extract brews, and then I made I had quite an experience with an all-grain batch of beer, but I think in my life I've made, 3 batches of home brew. But we do have a little 7.5-gallon pilot brewery here, and I have done lots of pilot brewing, which is really just a fancy word for home brewing. Recipe designs in a small batches. So I have a little experience with it, but...
Well, at 7.5 gallons, that's that's basically a homebrew system. So we'll count that.
Okay, good. You'll let me in the club.
That's right. Now, when I called you, I initially said that I wanted tips on brewing with fruit, but I was disappointed to hear that you said you would rather not talk about that subject.
Well, our fruit beers are very unique, and I spent some time in Belgium visiting the breweries in around Brussels and thinking long and hard about fruit beers and making lots and lots of pilot brews with lots of different microorganisms. And it took about 6 years for me to really figure out how to do it. And it's one of those things that, brewing is brewing. It's fairly simple. But the way we make fruit beer is very unique, and it's kind of proprietary. And as I was saying to you when we spoke privately previous to this, was that I always say that fruit beers, I have 2 daughters in college, and that's what pays for them to go to college. So we have to protect that. But I can tell you the thing about fruit beer is that I think about what wineries do. People need to spend time in wineries because you can learn a lot. To make a fruit beer, you can learn a lot from how wineries make wine. That's the only hint I can give.
So maybe after making a few batches of wine, we can gain some insight into your methods. Well, I can say that I'm disappointed, but I understand your caution in wanting to protect your livelihood. So,
well, with the internet nowadays, things are instantly disseminated. So, I appreciate that.
But you did give us some areas that we can explore, and one of those is a very popular topic nowadays. A buddy of mine just got back from a strong ale festival not too long ago in Boulder, and I was looking at the menu of all the beers that were out there, and most of them are being aged in barrels or on wood. And you said that you can help us with some tips on oak aging. So let's head that direction.
Okay.
First of all, what kinds of beers lend themselves to being oak aged? I mean, do all beers would all beers taste better if they were aged on oak?
In my experience, no. Now, obviously, some of the ones that everybody knows about, like stouts and strong dark beers, malty, rich, sweet beers, of course, do well in in oak. But we make a range of Bavarian style Weiss beers, and those are low hopped beers, kind of light in body, and we tried aging them in barrels, and they generally go off. Generally they can't. They don't have the legs for it. So I would say beers that don't have a lot of hops, beers that don't have a lot of alcohol, I would say do not age in oak. But what we like to age in oak are sour beers and strong beers. And then oftentimes blending them, you can come up with something really nice. For example, say an imperial stout and a sour brown ale. And you blend those two together, and even with a little bit of fruit beer added, you can make very nice complex beers. They do well.
So do you find that that if you age in a barrel, that in some styles it's kind of necessary to cut the barrel flavor by blending with another beer that hasn't been aged in a barrel?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it in that way, but I can say that there really are no hard and fast rules. Thinking out loud here, we from time to time make a true ice bock, and oftentimes it's very tannic, very, very harsh, very phenolic, and when we age that beer in bourbon barrels, it might take or wine barrels, it might take 3 years, but the oxidation, just like in red wine making, the oxidation will mellow that beer, and that beer will stand by itself, and it's very nice. But it takes a lot of years to get nice. Now that beer I would not blend with a sour beer. I'm more thinking of, say, a standard Bock beer, so a medium range Bock beer or a medium range stout that maybe has had 6 months in the barrel. Maybe they could be, in my opinion, maybe they're a little bit one-dimensional. It's kind of like alcohol, oak. Okay, well, that's fun, but what's next? Whereas when you have some sourness in there, it gives a little bit of that complexity. And the key to good beer, in my opinion, is simply drinkability coupled with complexity. To give you an idea, American-style light lagers are very drinkable, but they're not complex. Some microbrewed beers are very, very complex, like getting hit in the face, but you can't drink more than half a bottle. So the trick or the beauty or the sweet spot is when you blend those two together. When you age say a medium strength Bock beer or a medium strength stout, maybe it's full, but it's okay, but big deal. And then if you have some sour beer aged next to it, also for 6 months, put them together and, maybe it's a little bit too sour. Let's add some fruit beer and some light fruit beer in there, and hey, this is starting to come together. So really, in the end, it's about blending. So don't rely on, when you're at home, you don't have the luxury of 30, 55-gallon barrels to blend in the, mix a little bit of that, like you would in a winery. But so it becomes a problem for home brewers. But you could probably do something with oak chips, some medium toasted oak chips, and accomplish a similar type of thing. Although you don't have that oxidation that is taking place through the pores of the wood. But I think it's a reasonable facsimile. So again, maybe you could have 5 or 6 5-gallon carboys with oak chips in it, and then you can blend them.
Now, that was going to be my question: is if you can't afford, or if you don't want to spend the money on oak barrels, and you don't have a ready source for them, how would you use oak chips? Would you use them fresh, or would you do you have to soak them to get some of the woodiness out of them first? Or tell us how we would approach that.
I would just use them straight. I'd take them out of the bag and put them in your beer. Don't forget, you're talking about, I mentioned previous to this that we've tried light beers, a Bavarian-style Weiss beer with, say, 12 bitterness units, and it will go off. But we're talking about beers with 8% alcohol and a low pH and maybe 50 bitterness units, or a soured beer. And a soured beer resists the onslaught of contamination. And and the other thing that you have, the beauty of a home brewery is that you can take these chances, because what if it gets a little bit acidic? So what? It's kind of an interesting edge. I mean, it's not like you have to sell the beer to it's not going to be sitting, a case of it's not going to be sitting in the back of some bar somewhere in flyover country spoiling. And in other words, you're not trying to give it a year shelf life to reach the masses. You're trying to drink it yourself. So I think that I would just put the oak chips right in. I think the idea of trying to sterilize them and that whole ritual, I think, is a losing battle. To give you an idea, in the old days, people used to brew beer with no pasteurization. They would use air counter pressure, and they made beer. And the beer was fine. So you don't need to be too worried about those sorts of things, because well-made beer has an innate stability to it. But I will say, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, because I'm talking about a home brewery. We use a flash pasteurizer to ensure that our beer is stable when it goes out of the brewery.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my caveat, that always remember that. But we're different. You know, I sell beer that someone may buy, and they may cellar it for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, go to Belgium and look at these little breweries, and they have god-awful sanitary conditions. I don't think that you're going to find beer spoilers on an oak chip.
It is said that Brettanomyces, I've heard it said that Brettanomyces came from oak barrels. So could you get some good spoilers in there?
Oh, I would imagine so. But, I think that Brettanomyces gets in wood. In other words, I'm not an expert on Brettanomyces, but I doubt that when you cut down a tree and chip the wood and dry it out, that you have Brettanomyces inherently in the wood. I think that the Brettanomyces developed in the brewery and then was inoculated into the wood, and then it decided this is a nice place to live.
Mm.
So when you buy wood, it's not coming from a brewery. So you're most likely not seeing lots of beer spoilers. For example, the worst place for beer is in a brewery. If beer spoilers were ubiquitous in the environment, breweries could never have existed. In other words, the environment, the bacteria that live naturally in the world do not grow well in beer. Beer is very hostile. They have to come into your brewery. They have to figure out how to grow in the beer, and then once they get a foothold and they adapt, they take off. So most microbreweries, you will find, they have about a 3 to 5 year grace period where they don't have any bacterial infections. But if they're not on top of their game, it takes about that long for the bacteria to take hold. My point is simply that if you keep your equipment clean and use the normal sanitation methods, and you buy oak chips from a reputable dealer, and they come wrapped in a plastic bag to your brewery, and you treat them with respect. In other words, you don't throw them on the floor somewhere. You leave them in the bag until you're ready to use them, and then you put them into your barrel. I think you're going to do just fine.
And how much should we use per 5-gallon batch? Is there a set amount?
In my experience, when I have used oak chips, I've used around 7 pounds per 55 gallons. So let me do the math here. That's about about 2/3 of a pound per 5-gallon batch. So that's pretty heavy. That's very much oak.
Mm-hmm.
But if you taste my oak beers, they're very oaky. But the beauty of it is you can blend it. Again, you have a beer like a fruit beer, you can blend it. And if you have lots of carboys, just take a wine thief and start mixing and matching and be a little bit of a mad scientist, and you come up with all kinds of fun things.
So that's another dimension to add to the brewing experience.
Exactly.
How long would, say if you've got a barley wine or a beer of 8% or greater, is there a specific time frame that you look at for letting it rest on the oak chips?
I would say, depending on the beer, it's very difficult to say, but I would say anything less than 3 months. Well, with oak chips are going to go much faster than a barrel, maybe twice as fast as a barrel. I'm guessing. I don't have any, I haven't done tests on it, but that's my feeling. I would say that 3 months to a year would with that amount of oak would give you a pretty serious character, serious oak character.
And would you think that there would be a difference in aging in a glass carboy and aging in a plastic bucket? They say that plastic is slightly more oxygen permeable.
Yeah. Boy, that's a tough one. I have no experience with that, but I can venture an opinion that I've often thought that plastic would be better, but I don't know that for certain. And I know that a lot of kind of the homebrew gurus have written about it. And the reason why I say plastic would be more interesting is because oak is very porous. So if you age in a barrel, you're going to promote some oxidation, which in a strong red wine type beer, like a black beer or brown beer, those kind of things can be positive. And I don't know, maybe you can emulate that in plastic a little bit.
Sounds like an excuse for an experiment.
Yeah, exactly. You have to do it side by side. One thing that I found in my experience in brewing is that in the end you have to make your own decisions, because everybody has different, not necessarily opinions, but they have different equipment, different experiences, different expectations. So somebody may talk with great authority and say, this is the way to make beer. And then you try it, and your beer is awful. And then you do something that's totally counterintuitive, that's totally naughty, that's against the dogma that people scold you for doing, and your beer tastes great. Well, gosh, keep doing it that way. I don't care what people say.
Yeah, that's what we've come across many times in the past 90-some-odd weeks that I've been doing this show, is that when I first got into home brewing 10 years ago, there were certain things that don't do this, but definitely always do this, and these are hard and fast rules. But then you talk to people and they say, well, I used to think that way.
Yeah. Well, and I know from my experience that as a brewmaster in my brewery, I remember having times when a brewer would come to me and say, I made a mistake, I did something wrong, and I'll be, oh my God, the textbook says, oh my God, this is terrible, we're going to have to dump the beer, but let's hold it and see what happens. And it'll end up being the best beer we have ever made, and then it'll become our standard practice. And so you never underestimate the value of making mistakes.
Well, that certainly takes a lot of the pressure off.
Exactly.
Now, is there any other valuable advice that you can think of on the wood chips?
I would only use them once, and then I'd throw them out. A medium toast, because it comes in different levels of toast. That's a good choice. I mentioned 2/3 of a pound per 5-gallon barrel. That's a pretty strong flavor. So you could cut that down depending on what you want in your beer, if you just want its background or not.
Could you toast them yourself?
Oh, I'd imagine you could, but I've never done that. I would say why not, but that might be interesting. In other words, you might get some fresh aromatic compounds that volatilize off otherwise. Sure, why not? Maybe you could even smoke them. I don't know.
Ooh.
But I've never done that. I'm sure that would be interesting.
Like a nice smoked imperial porter or something.
Yeah, really.
The thing
with some apple wood or alder wood or something like that.
Yeah, that was another question. Is if you don't necessarily like the oak flavor, what are the other wood candidates that would be good?
My only experience is with oaks, so I can't really speak to that, but I can say that my gut feeling would be to keep away from piney type, soft woods. Stick with deciduous trees. Obviously, you have to use wood that's not been treated in some way. You can't go to the lumber yard and use that type of wood. But
no sawdust from the weekend project of making the deck.
Exactly. But if I think about wood that's used for smoking, as I said, apple, cherry, but I have no experience with them. Oak is generally what's used in wineries, so I would look to what's used in wineries. Wineries also have used redwood. I've seen redwood tanks in old wineries, but I have no idea. I would say that if I was a home brewer and I lived near a winery, I would visit a winery, talk to the winemaker, because they're light years ahead of us and me in understanding of wood.
Now, say you do live near a winery or a distillery, and you want to approach them and see if they have some barrels that you can purchase from them. What would you look for in selecting a barrel? Do you definitely want to stay away from new barrels?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't have a problem with a new barrel, but of course, the disadvantages of a new barrel is extremely expensive. I think wine barrels are measured in $500 plus $800. The other problem is that they would be very intense in flavor, and you would be missing any character from whatever had been in the barrel previous. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. But if I was a homebrew club, and that's really the only people who I don't think not many home brewers make 55 gallons at a time. Some do, I'd imagine, but it would mostly be a club. And if I was going to buy one barrel, I don't think I'd buy a new barrel. I think I would probably either go with a bourbon barrel or, say, a port barrel or some type of wine barrel, a used barrel. And what you would look for is, obviously, you can tell a lot by looking at a barrel how badly it's beat up. The other thing is the smell in the barrel. You can nose it. In other words, just take a whiff of what's in there. And a barrel that's off usually has somewhat of a nail polish-like aroma, and that's not a good sign. If the barrel smells fresh, if it smells like wood or it smells like bourbon or wine, it's probably in good shape. If it has been properly cared for, it will be tight. In other words, if it's been sitting outside in the back of a home repair center to be used as a planter, it's probably so dried up that it's not going to hold water. It'd be very difficult for you to get to restore it. So to reiterate, appearance, aroma, and ask the previous owner. If it's what type of bacteria have been growing in that. Are there Brettanomyces in it? Sometimes wine barrels are infected with the Brettanomyces. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. When I say solventy, that's ethyl acetate character. If you want to, and that could be a Brettanomyces character too, but it's a very, very unpleasant one. It smells like solvent or nail polish. So you want to make sure that those types of flavors or aromas are not in it. And then if you look in with a flashlight, you can tell if it's got a patina of green mold. It's not a good thing either.
Yeah, you would, like I say, if you were near a winery or a distillery, it seemed to me that it would be in your advantage to actually talk to someone there who knows about those things.
Right.
So if you've got your barrel at home or at the homebrew shop or wherever the club is meeting, and the barrel itself will hold 50 gallons, right?
Yeah, 50, 55.
But then you've got
There's different size barrels.
But then you've got to brew extra, and why is that?
As two things happen. One is the water will evaporate through the wood, so over time you'll develop headspace, and also some of the beer will actually go into the wood. So when you you don't want to fill the barrel up anyways to start with, because the barrel is rough. It causes nucleation sites. If you fill it to the top and then you bung it, you're going to blow the bung out because of the pressure that builds up. So it's better to leave a little bit of headspace. Let the beer quiet down. Let it degas. Let it warm up. Let it temperate. It will expand, and then you keep it topped. Maybe on a weekly basis or 2 weeks, you keep it topped. The headspace is not good because you can have mold growth or acidification.
And maybe too much oxidation?
Yes, exactly.
So it takes a little constant care.
Yes, it does.
At what point, then 3 months, 6 months down the line, is it the same rules to start tasting the beer as on oak chips?
Well, you're welcome to taste it as much as you want, but in my experience, I would let it go at least 6 months. But it depends on the beer. You know, if it's a light, easy drinking beer, if you let it go 6 months, it may start to go off. But in general, I haven't gone over 3 years. But I generally like to go a minimum of 6 months.
And then after you decide that it's time to keg it or bottle it, then can you reuse the barrel with another style of beer, or do you have?
Oh yes, by all means.
And then you get characteristics of not only the first inhabitant of the barrel, but you get the second one as well, right?
That's right. That's right. And you also have a serious investment. You know, you've invested at least $50 and maybe twice that in this barrel. It'd be awful expensive beer if you only used it once. And there's still a lot of character in that barrel, especially if it's like a bourbon barrel. Bourbon barrels by law are only used once, and you could and as you lose oak character over time, you could use the barrel many times. As you lose oak character, you could put chips in the barrel.
Ah. And at one point, does the barrel become better used as a planter than as something to hold beer in?
I don't know. That's up to the discretion of the flavor you're looking for. I think if you look at some wineries in Europe and probably even in California, and you look at some lambic breweries in Belgium, I bet you could use it for hundreds of years.
Wow! And at some point, you could inoculate it with something like Brettanomyces or something like that to kind of give it a new life.
That I have inoculated with various types of Brettanomyces, and that's kind of cool because they all develop differently. Different strains of Brettanomyces. Some are god awful. I wish I hadn't inoculated them, but some are very good.
And that's kind of a risk, I guess, if you've got 50 gallons of beer and you put the wrong stuff in there. Then
you blew $100 plus your beer. Brettanomyces can be nasty stuff.
And I would imagine that you keep it well away from your brand new brewery.
Yeah. When we started to use Brettanomyces, we never used to plate for wild yeast because we've never had problems with wild yeast. But as soon as Brettanomyces came to the party, we started to plate for wild yeast because there's always that fear. And
you can't do an acid wash because they're yeast too, and they will survive the acid wash.
Exactly. And I mean, but there's a lot of breweries that use Brettanomyces in stainless steel tanks, and professional brewers will tell you, look, it's not a problem. Standard sanitation will kill them. But remember, we're talking about in oak, and I think once you get it into the oak, I don't know if you'll ever get it out.
Any other tips that you can think of that would help us in our new career as oak agers?
Okay, you buy a barrel, you bring it home. The first thing I would do, some people put a little bit of water into the barrel, and then they pressurize the barrel and roll it around and see where the leaks are. What I would do is I would fill the barrel up with water because most likely it will leak. If it leaks, don't freak. Just give it time because the wood will swell. And hot water, like 140-degree water, seems to make the wood, in my opinion, swell more quickly and then stop leaking. But generally, I mean, unless it's gushing out, the wood will swell and stop leaking. And then the best thing to do is to leave the barrel always full of beer. You don't want to leave the barrel just empty. If you empty the barrel, let's say you bottle your beer and the barrel is now empty, what we use to clean the barrel is a product called ProxyCarb. It's the same stuff that you see advertised on TV. It's called ProxyClean. You know, have you ever seen those ads? Hey, I'm Willie Mays.
The OxyClean stuff.
OxyClean. That stuff works very well for cleaning barrels. Like, say a 60, you might use 12 ounces in a 55-gallon barrel. You fill it up with some warm water, maybe 2 gallons, and roll the barrel around your driveway and slosh this cleaner around. rinse it out really good, and then you would clean it with a citric acid solution. I think all of these products can be bought at a wine supply or homebrew supply shop, but you might use, again, 2 gallons with, say, 6 or 8 ounces of citric acid. Again, roll the barrel around, and that kind of neutralizes the proxycarb, which is a sodium percarbonate, I believe. And then smell the barrel, look into it. Is the barrel look clean? Does it smell clean? If you feel like it's still dirty, you repeat the process. If you feel like it's clean, then you have 3 things you could do. The best solution, the best idea is to fill it up with beer. If you can't fill it up with beer, you have 2 options to keep the barrel, keep it sweet. In other words, keep it from going off. Keep it from getting moldy or starting to smell like nail polish. What you would do is burn sulfur wicks, just like the Romans did. You can buy sulfur wicks, again, from a home wine supply, and they'll tell you how much to use, but you put a little, you put a wooden bung with a little, a trapeze on it, where you put the sulfur wicks in there, and you light them, maybe with a little propane torch. Put them in there, and then just leave the bung in there. The sulfur wicks burn, and they make a sulfur dioxide environment in the barrel. And then you maybe go back once a month or once every 2 months and repeat this process to keep oxygen out and to keep microorganisms from growing. The only problem with that is as the barrel sits over months, it will start to dry, and then it becomes once again a drama to get the barrel to swell up again. Fill it up with warm water, and it will swell shut. The other option is to fill the barrel with clean water and a solution of potassium metabisulfite, KMS, again, from a homebrew supply, and a little bit of citric acid. To give you an example, we have 3,000-gallon wine vats. We'll fill them up with water. We'll use 9 pounds of KMS and 18 pounds of citric acid. And that will keep the pH around, 4.5, and the SO2 level around 200 parts per million. And the barrel will stay wet and swelled up and clean. And then when you're ready to brew beer, you just drain it out, drain the water out, and fill it up with beer. The downside of it is if you don't keep the sulfur dioxide level up to around 200 parts per million with the KMS and the pH down around 4.5 or 5.5 with citric acid, you can start to get mold growth in that barrel. So a lot of wine people will discourage you from doing that because it requires you to be on top of your game, and you have to buy one of those little sulfur testing kits from the homebrew supply house. And it also helps to have a pH indicator paper or a pH meter to keep that barrel swelled and clean. I prefer that method, but a lot of people prefer the sulfur wicks. Sulfur wicks are simple, less calculations, less problematic, but the barrel will dry out, and then you have that momentary drama of, oh my God, my barrel's leaking like a sieve. Will it seal? And that's not fun.
Can you clean a barrel too much, or can you use too much of the sulfur wicks? Are you going to be playing with messing with the flavors?
I don't think so. Because the sulfur is in a gaseous form, and of course, when it hits the wet wood, it can turn to different compounds. Maybe sulfuric acid, for example. But you're going to rinse the barrel before you use it, and this is how wineries do it, and it's generally not problematic. Remember that SO2 is produced by yeast normally during fermentation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of these better living through chemistry guys, so don't get me wrong. I am, making pure beer, but it's not a problem, is all I'm trying to say.
One last chance. Anything else?
No, I think that's the main thing. If I kind of spoke fast, and I know I see a lot on the kind of the various forums. How do I clean barrels? How do I maintain them? And that's how we do it. So if I know I spoke quickly, but if people follow those little rules, I think they'll find that it's not so difficult.
Well, the good thing about listening to the podcast is if they missed something, they can hit rewind and hear it again.
So you mean my words will exist forever? I take everything back.
I don't know if anything digital is going to last forever.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that paper manuscripts from the 1800s are going to last longer than CDs and such.
Right.
Well, listen, I sure appreciate your time, and I really love your beers, and
Well, thanks.
You've just given me an excuse to visit Wisconsin is all.
There you go. Come by anytime. We're open 7 days a week for tours.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Dan Carey of New Glarus. If you haven't tried New Glarus beers, do yourself a favor and make the effort to get them, especially their raspberry tart and their Wisconsin Belgian red. Man, they're good. And by the way, I apologize for the clicking and popping in the interview. I forgot there was a thunderstorm going on during that interview. And so, risking my life to bring you guys good brewing information. There you go. Next week, I plan to talk to a local award-winning brewer, Mark Smith, about conical fermenters. I've had a bunch of emails requesting the topic, talking about conicals or cylindro-conicals, if you want to be more specific. And Mark is the kind of guy who I know researched the subject well before making his purchase of his conical, so I have confidence that he can help us out. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And don't forget to tell us where you're from. And, if you want to send photos of yourself with your Basic Brewing shirt, if you go somewhere fun this summer on your vacation, well, you can wear your shirt and take a picture and send it in. We'll put you on the new gallery thing. And while you're on our site looking at the new gallery, you can check out our online shop where you can find great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. In our first one, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing, stepping into all grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort and give you some choices in how to do it. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online. And I'll pack it up myself and send it to you. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Understanding Digital Processing, 2nd edition, and Belkin Universal 1200 VA Emergency Battery Backup. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we'll get a little teeny chunk of that. We appreciate your support. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. Or listening. I guess if you're a boat and you're kind of sideways, you're listening, but I hope that gets better. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dodson down in Austin, who also did our logo. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.